Yes, miracles happen when you move. Heaven is coming. Oh, this is a move. Yes, this is a move. We're in a move now. This is a move. Oh, this is a move. If you believe that, just say, yes, this is a move. We're in a move. He's moving on your behalf. This is a move, yeah. Oh, this is a move. Oh, this is a move, yeah. And miracles happen when you move. Healing is coming in this room. Oh, miracles happen when you move. Heaven is coming. Just declare that right where you are. Say, miracles happen when he moves, and healing is coming right where you are. Yes, miracles happen when you move. Yes, heaven is coming. Oh, heaven is coming. Oh, heaven is coming. Oh, heaven is coming. Yes, heaven is coming. Yeah, heaven is coming. Yes, heaven is coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's flowing. It's falling. It's falling. Heaven is coming. Yeah, yeah. Heaven is coming. Yes, heaven is. For we're in a move. We're in a move. Oh, we're in a move. Yes, we're in a move. Oh.
Beautiful. Wow, that was such a beautiful, sacred moment. Thank you, Bree. And thank you to our worship team for just ushering us into this beautiful moment. And how beautiful it is as we give our offering and our sacrifice. It's such a sacred thing. And just my favorite time. It's just so gentle and precious up here on this platform right now. You just want to breathe it in. You know what? Everybody just take a moment and just forget all your worries and cast all your cares on him. And just breathe. Because you know what? That's, I think, what a lot of us need nowadays. So, many of you know that I am not a fan of being too stringent and taking too many notes. I like to kind of improvise and feel my way, but I'm going to delve a little deeper today. I found some quotes I wanted to share with you guys. And just in looking at, it's, you know, obviously the theme that I've been going on is examining the world around us and asking the question of how we as Christians should be conducting ourselves and handling ourselves. And what does God want from us in the season that we're in right now in order for his will to be done? And so one thing that is undeniable, and you can't turn on your TV or your radio or your phone or whatever you're listening to without hearing the subject of diversity. Diversity, diversity, diversity. And this is obviously not something any of us are against. But I see when looking at the world how it's not so much the goal, but the way in which you get there. And the world, in its attempt to accomplish certain things without God, will inevitably fail every time. And I wanted to quote you something, just to give it a little perspective, because, you know, we in the situation we're in now, in the season we're in, and all the things that we're dealing with in the world, it just feels to us, especially to the younger generation and to younger people who don't have the memories of some of the things that have happened, especially over the past century and throughout history. You know, and that's why it's so important to know that. And I think being a prophetic people, you know, you often, when you think of prophecy and prophetic, you think of seeing the future. And yes, that's true, but it's more than that. Being prophetic is seeing the bigger picture. It's like, and I've used this analogy so many times, it's like zooming up on Google Earth and seeing bigger. And then you can see the past, the present, the future. And I think in observing prophetic people, one of them being my own father, and many others, is that oftentimes when ministering to an individual, God would show, for instance, he would show my dad the person's past, but not random, insignificant things. Something significant that's holding them back in the present from reaching their future. So seeing prophetically is seeing bigger. And I really think that this is something that the church and the people of Christ need to be doing in the season we're in, is seeing it bigger, so that we have more of God's perception, and seeing the way God wants us to see things. And so in the quest for diversity to gain unity, I see the world around us attempting to do this without God, and that's the mistake. And in so doing creates confusion and arguments and deception and division. And so I found a quote. Now this was written in 1980, so it can give you a little bit of perspective. It was written by a journalist. His name was Malcolm Muggeridge. And he wrote, and it's quite a long quote. I'm going to read, I'll just read sections of it for you, the most important sections. But I think we need to hear this today. And again, he wrote this in 1980. We look back upon history, and what do we see? Empires rising and falling, revolutions and counter-revolutions, wealth accumulating and then dispersed, one nation dominant and then another. Shakespeare speaks of the rise and fall of great ones that ebb and flow with the moon. In one lifetime, we've seen England rule a quarter of the world. We've heard a crazed, cracked Austrian proclaim to the world the establishment of a German Reich that would last for 1,000 years. An Italian clown announced he would restart the calendar to begin with his own assumption of power. A murderous Gregorian brigand in the Kremlin, acclaimed by the intellectual elite of the Western world as wiser than Solomon, more enlightened than Ahsoka, more humane than Marcus Aurelius. I've seen America wealthier and in terms of military weaponry more powerful than all the rest of the world put together, so that Americans, had they so wished, could have outdone an Alexander or a Julius Caesar in the range and scale of their conquests. And all in one lifetime, all gone with the wind. England is now an island off the coast of Europe. Hitler and Mussolini are dead and remembered only in infamy. Stalin is a forbidden name in the regime he helped to found and dominate for some 3 decades. America, afraid of running out of the fluid that keeps the motorways roaring, troubled by memories of Vietnam, and, of course, Watergate. All in one lifetime, all gone with the wind. But behind the debris of these solemn supermen and self-styled imperial diplomatists, there stands the gigantic figure of one, because of whom, by whom, in whom and through whom alone mankind may still have peace. And that person is Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. And so the reason that I quoted that to you is because, again, this was written in 1980. And if you think about how many things have happened in the last 100 years, the rise and falls of empires, but the one thing that stands is that message. The one thing that stands is that person of Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. And so we are in this situation right now, and we're thinking, oh, we're so overwhelmed by it. We forget so much of what just happened in the last 100 years. I just quoted to you just a few of the things that are in our history just in the last 100 years, gone. But who remains? Jesus Christ. And so when I think about this quest for unity and diversity, it is not an evil quest. It's something that people, legitimately desire for fairness and equality, and this is not a bad thing. What's wrong is that we're dominated, and our culture is dominated by secular humanism instead of Jesus Christ, instead of Christianity. And the answer is there in Christianity. And, I think what everybody's looking for is the unity that ties together the diversity. I'm going to say it again. The unity that everyone seeks is tied together through diversity. So how do we do this? And this is what I see as being the problem. And, the answer to that is actually in Christianity. And in Christianity, there's unity, diversity, and community in the Trinity. And no other religion can offer you that. You can search the world, you can travel the world and speak to the wisest and the greatest of all religions, but they cannot offer you that. The only thing that can offer you that is through Christ in Christianity and in the Trinity. That is where the unity and diversity is. And so our goal is union. So I started to think about, when I was a little girl, my dad would randomly have us take communion together as a family. It wasn't just like, okay, we're going to do it every week or we're going to do it it would just be a random thing. He'd walk in and he'd say, you know what, today we're going to have communion together. And we'd grab some bread and we'd get some grape juice or whatever we had. And we'd sit together as a family and take communion. And it wasn't in front of people and it wasn't on display. And of course, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for us when we take communion here together and include you. It's a very sacred and beautiful thing, and I'm not knocking it. But it was a special thing that my dad used to do with us and we used to do as a family growing up. And it's something that I do in my own family. And not because, at this time you've got to take communion, or in this season or in this whatever you have to take communion. Do that. But sometimes God will just ask you to take communion. And why? Why would he do that? And so I looked up the definition of communion in the dictionary, just dictionary definition. And the thing I found, there's a list of things, but the thing I found that stood out to me in the dictionary definition of communion is intimate communication. And I thought about that, and I thought about in our relationship with God and when we speak to God. That is an intimate communication. And so when you are taking communion, it's not just about the ritual. It's an act that, you're using all of your senses when you take communion. You're tasting, you're feeling, you're seeing, you're hearing. All of the senses are used in the act of taking communion. And this is such a beautiful thing. And I think about, the time we're in, and this quest for union and diversity. And it just makes me think that, is it really, and I'm not just talking about Christians now, I'm talking about everybody. Is it really union that we seek, or is it communion that we really are looking for? And I think that for people in the world, especially Christians, we understand this, but the world doesn't really know what they're looking for. And what they're looking for in the unity and the union is the communion, which is more than a ritual, but this engagement with our Creator and with our Savior. And that, to me, it just blew my mind, because I was able to see that bigger picture. I have all these questions, and I watch all the things going on in the world, and I go to God and I ask Him, what does it mean? What do I need to see? What do I need to see? And this is what all of us should be doing. All of us should be asking this. And I recognize that the union we seek is truly, whether we realize it or not, is that communion with God that unites all of us. And so you cannot have that without Christ. And I thought about Lazarus. It's maybe a little off, but it's coming to me now. I'm thinking about Lazarus, and Lazarus had died, and Mary said to Jesus, if you had been there, he wouldn't have died. And Jesus said to the disciples, come, he's asleep. And the disciples said to him, well, then wouldn't they just wake him up? I'm imagining this conversation. And Jesus said, no, he's dead. And they go there, and he says, roll away the stone. And he called Lazarus forth. And it made me think about the overcoming of death and what Christ actually did for us. And if you look at these events, it is so much deeper and so much more beautiful than I know I had ever imagined. And I think each generation, when we go through these things, we see deeper. We go further forward towards that perfect will of God. And no matter how difficult it is, there is a solace in the sacredness of that communion with God. And when Christ called Lazarus forth and said, roll away the stone, it was a reflection of what was to come with him, that the stone was rolled away and he was resurrected. And so, and it makes me think too of, understanding death in this life. I've certainly come to understand that more, and in dealing with death, I have lost my fear of it. Because when you and many of you know what I'm talking about right now, when you've experienced loss and you've been with your loved ones as they've passed on, that you, and I know this is for me, had a profound effect on me to know, as my loved one went to be with the Lord, to feel where he was going. And there was just suddenly no more fear of death. And you think about someone like Lazarus being raised from the dead, and I think about my own grandmother who, I think she was in her 60s, right? She was in her 60s. She had meningitis and died 3 times and came back. For someone who's already died and come back, you can't make that person afraid by threatening them with death if they've already seen it. And we know that death has no victory and no sting, because death is dead, and it died with Christ. And so I do have another just beautiful quote that I wanted to share with you today. It's actually a song, and it's the lyrics to a song written by Donné. I hope I said his name right. But it's such a beautiful song. And so I can't sing, so I'll read the lyrics to you. And it says, when engulfed by the terror of tempestuous sea, unknown waves before you roll. At the end of doubt and peril is eternity. Though fear and conflict seize your soul, when surrounded by the blackness of the darkest night, oh, how lonely death can be. At the end of this long tunnel is a shining light, for death is swallowed up in victory. But just think of stepping on shore and finding it heaven, of touching a hand and finding it's God's, of breathing new air and finding it's celestial, of waking up in glory and finding it home. That's beautiful. And in my own experience, it helped me so much to be able to understand that there's so much more than just this life. And that one day, and I think that's the desire of all of us, is to be with God. And so I do not feel sad for the ones that we've lost, because they are in a glorious place. And so in closing, I want to say this. You know, I've touched on the issue of diversity and unity, and I'll go deeper into it as God shows me more. I'll speak to you more about it. But the nature of sin, and the nature of suffering, and the nature of salvation, and the nature of reality in the person of Jesus Christ. And I bend my knee to him, and I find in him everything. Everything. And so when your perspective becomes focused on that, and when you understand your faith, your Christian faith, regardless of denomination and theological debate, and we could go on forever, that fundamental thing is the answer to everything. Just as in the quote that I quoted you earlier, we've seen all these things happen throughout history. All of these things rise and fall. But the one thing that stands is Jesus Christ, who split time in half. BC and AD, they can try to change those letters now, but we know what that means. Before Christ and Anno Domini, after our Lord. And so I'll close with that. And you know what, I think maybe we just have a little bit more worship. What do you think, Charlie? You ready? All right, let's do that. And before I go, I just want to encourage all of you that we're here for you. We love you. Don't miss our Israel Update show every Friday at israelupdate.org. Don't miss Prophetic Rewind, because I have got tons of stuff I'm throwing out there every Monday at kim.tv, and you'll be able to see on our social media platforms, House of Destiny, Kim Clement Prophetic Rewind, Israel Update. My mother and I have our own pages. Communicate with us, talk to us, and tell us what you think, because we want to hear from you. And in a time where I really feel we should be communicating with each other and with God, that we will find the answers. And not just the answers, but the right way to get to where we want to go. And so my prayers are with you always. And I love you, and we love you here at the House of Destiny. Thank you for watching the House of Destiny's YouTube channel. Please subscribe to get all of our latest content. This video was brought to you by all of our generous supporters. If you'd like to give, click the link in the description. We have new episodes every week, so stay tuned, and remember, you're somewhere in the future and you look much better than you look right now.